All right, this is video 3 in preparation for not just your mock exams, but your real GCSEs. And now we're moving on to the Renaissance period. Now remember, if you do not remember what that is, the Renaissance period is 1500 to 1700. And this is a period where things started to be questioned more. So at this point, we're going to go through reasons why there was progress, but also reasons why there was little progress. And remember, by progress or little progress, we mean change in medicine. So we're going to look at a range of these factors here. Just a spoiler, for this, there's a lot more reasons for progress than little progress because the Renaissance, and I will just quickly type it here, the Renaissance was a period of rebirth of ideas. And people began to really like the idea of humanism. People began to love learning. So as a result, they began to question old ideas. And it really helped that during this period, the concept and the power of the church was declining at this point. So, first thing we're going to look at is the concept of progress and why there was progress during this time period. So, person number one, reason for progress, is Vesalius. And we're going to try and keep it really short. Remember, you need to remember why it caused impact and change. And a lot of these people caused change because they questioned the old theories of Galen and the concept of the four humours. So, Vesalius studied the human anatomy and he disproved 300 of Galen's ideas, including that the jawbone is one part, not two. So the key thing for here is to remember this fact here, that he disproved 300 of Galen's old theories. And as a result, it allowed him to question it. But why was he allowed to do that? Well, he would dissect the human body, which and now at this point was becoming further allowed, and there wasn't as much negativity around it. People hadn't done this before. In the medieval period, it was outlawed. But as a result of this, what Vesalius did is he created clear diagrams of the human body, which allowed us more understanding of this keyword here, the anatomy. Now, if we're going to talk about negatives, I think the key thing we understand about Vesalius is he only helped us understand the image of the human body, not the actual working of the human body. And I think that's really important that we understand that is that although Vesalius was really important in understanding the anatomy, he didn't actually help us understand the image of understand what actually each part did. He did help us with the first understanding of the human skeleton, and he helped us understand what the body should look like during surgery. And this was key in 1543 because he produced Fabric of the Human Body, which was his book, which had clear diagrams of the human body labeled. And the key thing, I've missed one thing on here, and I think it might be really important to understand, is that Vesalius's work was used for future positions. And his work was made into fugitive sheets, which were like one-page overview of his work. And because of the work of people like Vesalius, people wanted to start studying this word here, the anatomy. So he set the foundation for future findings. Harvey, who we're going to look at in a minute on this page here, used Vesalius's work and findings to develop his own findings. So Vesalius was really important. If we're going to remember Vesalius in one word, just remember Vesalius as anatomy. And remember, the key thing is what impact did he have? If we're going to remember Harvey in one word, we remember Harvey as the heart man. So what did Harvey do? Well, Harvey took Vesalius's work one step further by developing the understanding of the purpose of the heart. So he disproved old ideas about what the heart did. Harvey proved that the heart was a pump that pumped blood through the body with veins and arteries. And again, really important, and it's worth mentioning for those people that want to aim for the very top grades, is that the way in which he did this is he used the fire pump to be able to do this. And that caused significant understanding because he proved that blood can only go in one direction. Whereas before, people believed that blood magically appeared and it could go anywhere, and ultimately, he proved it was like a circulatory system. He disproved the old ideas of Galen, who believed that blood was made from the liver and would burn away and magically reappear. Harvey once again used dissection and developed his ideas in a book called Motion of the Heart and Blood. And I think the key thing that we need to understand for Harvey is that although Vesalius understood what the body looked like, Harvey developed expertise in understanding aspects of the body. So the reason we have heart surgeons today could be because of the impact and the understanding of Harvey. The next two reasons for progress are very easy ones. Now, this one, again, at this point in year 11, I won't spend too long in this video talking about it, but the printing press was a massive reason for progress. The printing press took power away from the church. Remember, before the printing press, books were written by hand by monks and nuns. Books being printed allowed for new ideas to be spread. People could now spread their ideas and prove and disprove. And what we did notice about this is that we had a lot more people disproving and going against the ideas of Galen, which is really important to remember. Books were produced in vast numbers, so would be cheaper and could produce 3,600 pages a day before it was 50 pages a day. However, being historians, we need to think of arguments. You could argue that the progress of the printing press was limited at the start. And the reason for this is because of the books being produced in Latin. So at the start, a lot of books were produced in Latin. As we develop into the late part of the Renaissance, more books were written in English. However, the short-term impact of the printing press wasn't as effective. The long-term reason for progress is there and reasons for it. The Royal Society were a fourth reason for progress. Now, the Royal Society encouraged a scientific approach to investigation. They had a motto which said, take nobody's word for it. And ultimately, they wanted people to discuss ideas instead of accepting what they are told. Reread Galen, what's wrong with it? That's what they encourage people to do. So, for example, there were some new works going on at this time. So, Leeuwenhoek's work on animalcules was the first scientific example of what a germ looks like. So, animalcule was something which Leeuwenhoek looked at after scraping the plaque of the teeth. And ultimately, he got a picture of what a germ might look like. That's it at this stage, but that's a step forward. The Royal Society also had a charter from Charles II giving them credibility. So when they produced their first journal, the Philosophical Transaction, lots of people respected it. Lots of people sent work in for them to discuss. It was written in simple English. And that's where at this point we start to get more impact from things like the printing press. Remember, the Royal Society were a bit later. The Royal Society were in 1660, where they first met in Gresham College in London. But the Royal Society were all about discussion, discussion, discussion. The last thing for progress, and then we've got one thing for little progress in this video, is Sydenham. Sydenham will come up in your GCSE if a Renaissance question comes up, because he's a British example of a medic. So Sydenham classified illnesses. Now, if we're going to remember Sydenham, we just need to remember him as the guy that began to disprove the four humours. He was the English Hippocrates. And he started to really develop the concept of what diseases looked like, which hopefully allowed us in the future to start thinking about how to treat them. So he differentiated between scarlet fever and measles, and he created a collection of descriptions of disease in his book Observations Medici, which became the standard textbook for medical training. Three things that Sydenham encouraged: observe your patient, write down the symptoms, and treat it. This got people thinking that actually there was more to disease than the four humours, hence why he was named the English Hippocrates. If we're going to remember Sydenham, he was the foundation to beginning the understanding of the cause of disease. The only thing we need for Sydenham now to be even stronger, remember, there was a lack of science and technology. At this point, Sydenham was observational. So even though it was progress, we're not going to have a huge amount of progress because of lack of science and technology. Now, the only thing we need to look at for little progress, because the Renaissance was a time of strict progress, even though some areas have aspects that you could argue against, is the Great Plague. So we have two significant epidemics in this course. You've got the 1348 Black Death and the 1665 Great Plague. Now, the Great Plague showed little progress because it made people panic. And that's a big thing you need to remember. It made them go back to old methods of medicine, which showed that although there were new ideas, those ideas were minimal in a time of crisis. People went back to blaming the plague on medieval methods like sinning, Jewish people, miasma. Treatment went back to bleeding and purging, and people would use methods to cleanse the air to remove miasma. The only thing we could argue that isn't in this on this slide is that the plague actually showed some progress because of quarantine rules. So there was actually a village in Derbyshire, Eyam, and what they did was they said that nobody could enter the area for 40 days. And they were actually one of the areas that weren't overly hit by the plague. So I think it's really important to understand that although there was limited progress because of the plague, you could, as a historian, still argue there was some form of progress. That's all you need to know now. Why was there progress? Why was there little progress? This is what you need to know for the mocks and for the real exams.